The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council stretched high above Ambassador Kang Minho as he walked through the entrance gates. His black diplomatic uniform looked plain and simple compared to the flowing robes and gleaming armor worn by other species around him. The building itself was beautiful beyond anything on Earth, made from living crystal that changed colors as different alien delegates passed by. Minho had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, ever since Earth received its invitation, to address the Council about joining the war effort. He carried a small briefcase containing everything humanity had to offer. Not weapons or ships or advanced technology like other species brought. Instead, Minho carried population charts, military training records, and psychological profiles. He carried the one thing Earth had in abundance that other worlds seemed to lack: people who were willing to fight. The main assembly hall was enormous. Thousands of alien beings filled seats that rose up in circles around a central speaking platform. Some creatures floated in the air, others needed special tanks filled with liquid, and a few were so large they had their own viewing platforms built just for their massive bodies. The noise was incredible, as hundreds of different languages mixed together in a sound that hurt Minho's ears. Near the front, he could see the most powerful species in the galaxy. The Kraveth looked like giant insects with razor-sharp claws and armor plating that could stop laser fire. Their representative, Thexanara, sat perfectly still, her 4 eyes watching every movement in the room. Next to her, the energy being called, Velthor, flickered between different colors as thoughts passed through its crystalline form. The Petrarch Elder Grondak took up an entire section by himself, his rock-like body older than human civilization. Minho found his assigned seat in a section marked for new applicants and minor species. The chair was too big for his human frame, clearly designed for larger beings. Around him sat representatives from worlds that had recently joined the coalition or were hoping to join like Earth. Most of them looked nervous. Some had been waiting decades for their chance to speak. The session began when Overlord Kylex of the Hegemony rose from his throne-like seat at the center of the hall. His voice boomed across the chamber without any need for amplification, a genetic gift of his species. "The Council recognizes the growing threat of the Void Swarm," he announced. "All member species must contribute to our defense efforts according to their capabilities." One by one, different worlds presented their contributions. The Meccano Syndicate offered battle robots that could repair themselves in combat. The Aquarian fleet promised their underwater shipyards could build vessels faster than any other species. The Luminari demonstrated energy weapons that could punch through asteroid fields. Each presentation drew impressed murmurs and approving clicks from the audience. Finally, Kylex's gaze fell on the human section. "The Council will now hear from Earth," he said, his tone suggesting this was just a formality before moving on to more important business. Minho stood and walked to the speaking platform. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet that filled the hall. Every alien eye, sensor, and consciousness focused on him as he activated the translation device and cleared his throat. "Honored Council members," he began, "Earth requests membership in the Galactic Defense Coalition. We offer our contribution to the war against the Void Swarm." Thexanara leaned forward slightly, her mandibles clicking with what might have been interest. "What technology do you bring, human? What weapons?" Minho opened his briefcase and pulled out a data tablet. "We bring soldiers, human soldiers." The reaction was immediate. Laughter erupted from dozens of different species, creating a chaotic symphony of sounds. The crystal being Velthor's entire form flashed bright yellow in what Minho's briefing materials had told him was their equivalent of amused disbelief. Even the usually serious Petrarch Elder Grondak made a deep rumbling sound that shook the floor. "Soldiers?" Thexanara's voice carried clearly over the noise. "Flesh and blood soldiers?" "Yes," Minho replied, keeping his voice steady despite the mockery surrounding him. "Earth has a population of 8 billion people. Our military training programs can produce combat-ready soldiers faster than any automated system. We have experience in every type of warfare environment." More laughter filled the hall. A delegate from the Sylvanese, whose species lived for thousands of years, spoke up. "Human, your people live for what? Barely a century? What use are warriors? who die of old age before they finish basic training. Our soldiers don't need thousands of years to become effective, Minho answered. Human military academies produce skilled fighters in months, not decades. Velthor's crystalline form pulsed with different colors as it communicated. The translation came out in a voice like breaking glass. We have studied your species' biology. You have no natural armor, no energy manipulation abilities, no enhanced strength or speed. What can soft tissue accomplish against enemies that destroy starships? Minho felt sweat beginning to form on his forehead, but he pressed on. Humans are adaptable. We learn quickly, we work well in teams, and we don't give up easily. Our psychological profiles show psychological profiles. The interruption came from a Nexari delegate, its mechanical voice filled with electronic static that somehow conveyed amusement. You offer us the minds of creatures that panic at loud noises and flee from shadows. That's not accurate, Minho protested. Human soldiers have fought in every possible environment on our world. We've survived ice ages, plagues, natural disasters, and wars that lasted for years. We know how to keep fighting when everything seems hopeless. Grondak's massive stone head turned toward the platform. When he spoke, his voice was like boulders, grinding together. Child species, you speak of survival, but surviving on one small world is not the same as fighting entities that consume entire solar systems. The Void Swarm has weapons that turn matter into energy and energy into nothing. They adapt to every strategy we use against them. Your soft bodies would be dissolved before you could fire a single shot. Minho pulled up holographic displays showing human military history. We've faced impossible odds before, he said. At the Battle of Thermopylae, 300 soldiers held off an army of thousands. During the siege of Stalingrad, civilians with basic weapons stopped one of the most advanced militaries in our history. On Iwo Jima. Ancient history, Thex Nara interrupted. Wars fought with primitive weapons against your own species. The Void Swarm is beyond your comprehension. Dr. Lee Subin, humanities chief xenobiologist, stood up from the audience section. She had been quiet until now, studying the alien reactions and taking notes. If I may address the council, she said. Kylex gestured for her to approach the platform. Speak quickly. The council has many other matters to consider. Dr. Lee activated her own data tablet and projected images of Void Swarm encounters. The swarm adapts to artificial intelligence and energy-based attacks because those follow predictable patterns. But human consciousness doesn't follow logical patterns. We make intuitive leaps, emotional decisions, and creative solutions that can't be programmed or predicted. The laughter had died down, but the skepticism remained strong. A delegate from the gas giant dwelling Zephyrians spoke in a voice like wind through caves. You suggest that irrationality is an advantage in warfare? Not irrationality, Dr. Lee replied. Flexibility. Every battle report we've studied shows the swarm learning from its enemies and adapting their own tactics against them. But humans don't stick to one tactic. We change strategies mid-battle based on instinct and experience. Velthor flickered through several colors before responding. Your species has no experience with space combat, no knowledge of energy weapons, no understanding of dark matter physics. How would you even communicate with your forces across the distances involved in galactic warfare? We'll learn, Minho said simply. Humans are very good at learning. This brought another wave of laughter. From the assembly, Kylex raised one massive hand for silence. The council appreciates Earth's enthusiasm, he said, his tone making it clear he thought enthusiasm was worthless. However, warfare against the Void Swarm requires proven technologies and experienced warriors. Perhaps humans could contribute by manufacturing supply containers or maintaining communication equipment. Minho felt his jaw tighten. We're not asking to handle supplies. We're offering to fight. With what? Thexanara's mandibles clicked rapidly. You have no space navy, no energy shields, no quantum weapons. You would send flesh and bone against enemies that exist partially outside normal space-time. We would send human ingenuity, human determination, and human courage, Minho replied. Things that can't be measured in your databases. Grondak made his rumbling sound again. Courage is admirable in young species, But courage without capability is simply a faster path to extinction. The session was clearly ending. Kylex was already turning his attention to other matters, and many delegates had stopped paying attention entirely. "The Council thanks Earth for its offer," he announced in a formal tone. "We will file your proposal under consideration for support roles." Minho opened his mouth to protest, but Dr. Lee touched his arm and shook her head slightly. The decision had been made. As they gathered their materials and prepared to leave, Minho, 3 months after the council meeting, General Park Ji-won sat in his office deep beneath Seoul, reading reports that made his stomach turn. The classified intelligence came through secure channels from human observers stationed throughout Coalition space. Every report told the same story. The war against the Void Swarm was going badly, very badly. On his main screen, a map of the galaxy showed red zones spreading like a disease from the outer rim territories. Each red dot represented a star system that had gone silent, consumed by entities that seemed to exist halfway between energy and matter. The swarm moved unlike anything military strategists had ever encountered. They didn't follow predictable invasion patterns or establish supply lines. They simply appeared, devoured everything in a system, and moved on to the next target. Dr. Cho Hyun-woo burst through the office door without knocking, his hair messy and his lab coat stained with coffee. He had been working around the clock in the research facility 3 levels down, trying to understand enemy samples that Coalition forces had managed to recover from battle sites. His assistant Kim Nari followed close behind, carrying a tablet, filled with data that neither of them fully understood yet. "General, we found something," Dr. Cho said, setting a containment unit on the desk. Inside the transparent container, a fragment of dark matter pulsed with faint purple light. "This piece came from a void entity that attacked the Kepler research station last week." General Park leaned forward to examine the sample. It looked like living shadow, shifting and changing shape, even though it was supposedly dead. "What did you find?" Kim Nari activated her tablet and projected a holographic display above the desk. "The void entities aren't just energy beings like the Coalition thinks. They have a quantum signature that resonates with consciousness itself. But here's the interesting part. They can only interface with artificial intelligence, not biological minds." "Explain that in terms a soldier can understand," the general said. Dr. Cho pointed to wave patterns on the display. "Every Coalition ship uses AI to control weapons, navigation, and defense systems. The Void Swarm has learned to hack into those AI networks and turn them against their own ships. That's why energy weapons pass right through them, and why their tactics always seem one step ahead of Coalition strategy. But biological minds work differently," Kim Nari added. "Our neural patterns are too chaotic and unpredictable for them to interface with. A human brain making split-second decisions based on instinct and emotion creates quantum noise that they can't decode or manipulate." General Park stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the underground complex. Hundreds of human scientists and military personnel worked at stations throughout the facility, analyzing data and preparing for a war that their own government had been excluded from. "You're telling me that the same thing the Council mocked us for, using biological soldiers instead of AI systems, might actually be an advantage?" "More than an advantage," Dr. Cho said excitedly. "It might be the only thing that can stop them. Every battle report shows the same pattern. The swarm adapts to whatever the Coalition throws at them because they're literally reading the AI systems in real time and adjusting their tactics instantly." A communication alert sounded from the general's desk. The face of Captain Oh Jae-hyun appeared on the screen, broadcasting from Earth's deep space monitoring station. His expression was grim as he spoke. "General, we're receiving priority transmissions from Coalition forces in the Vega sector. Admiral Velneth of the Aquarian fleet is requesting immediate evacuation assistance." The transmission switched to a recording from the Admiral himself. The usually calm Aquarian looked panicked, his gills fluttering rapidly as he spoke. "Coalition Command, this is Admiral Velneth. The Void Swarm has penetrated our defensive perimeter. Our automated defense systems are not just failing, they're turning against us. I repeat, our own weapons are firing on our ships. We've lost contact with 43 systems in the past week. Whatever these entities are, they're beyond our capability to understand or fight." General Park muted the transmission and turned back to the scientists. How sure are you about this biological advantage theory? 60% confident, Dr. Cho admitted. But that's based on limited data. We need to test it in actual combat conditions to be certain. Kim Nari pulled up, another display showing coalition fleet movements. General, look at this. The species with the most advanced AI systems are suffering the worst losses. The Meccano Syndicate has lost 90% of their automated battle fleet. The Nexari's quantum computing networks were completely corrupted within hours of first contact. What about the less advanced species? General Park asked. That's the pattern we noticed, Dr. Cho said. Species that still use biological pilots and manual weapon systems are lasting longer in combat, even though their technology is inferior. The Kravith warrior caste refuses to use AI assistance in battle as a matter of honor, and they're having more success than anyone else. A new alert came through the communication system. This time it was President Yoon Seojin calling from the Blue House. Her face appeared on the screen, and the general could see the strain of the past few months in her expression. General Park, I need a full briefing on our military readiness. The coalition is starting to ask questions about human capabilities. What kind of questions, Madam President? Unofficial channels, she replied carefully. Field commanders who are running out of options. They're not going through the council, but some of them are beginning to wonder if we might have something to contribute after all. General Park felt a grim satisfaction. 3 months ago, the galaxy's greatest powers had laughed at human military capabilities. Now those same powers were quietly asking if maybe they had been wrong. What's our current recruitment status? Recruitment centers are reporting steady numbers, the president replied. Word is getting out about the war situation, even though we're trying to keep panic to a minimum. Military volunteers are up 300% over normal levels. Dr. Cho stepped closer to the communication screen. Madam President, if I may interrupt, we believe we know why the coalition is struggling. The Void Swarm can interface with artificial intelligence, but not biological consciousness. Human soldiers might be uniquely suited to fight this enemy. President was quiet for several seconds as she processed this information. Doctor, are you telling me that our lack of advanced AI systems is actually an advantage? Yes, Madam President. Every human decision made in combat would be unpredictable to the swarm. They can read computer algorithms and adapt to them instantly, but they can't predict human intuition or emotional responses. On the main display, new reports continued to arrive from across coalition space. The proud Kravith homeworld had fallen despite their warrior traditions. The energy beings of the Luminary Collective were being drained like dying stars whenever they encountered void entities. Even the ancient Petrarchs, whose civilization predated most galactic history, were abandoning their fortress worlds in retreat. Captain Oh Jae-hyun's voice came through the speakers again. General, we're receiving a priority message from Commander Rixtal of the Hegemony 3rd Fleet. He's requesting immediate consultation with Earth military strategists. Commander Rixtal? General Park knew that name. He was one of Overlord A. Kylex's most trusted officers, a veteran of a dozen successful campaigns. What does he want to consult about? Unconventional warfare tactics, Captain O replied. He says their standard military doctrine is proving completely ineffective against swarm entities. Kim Nari looked up from her tablet. General, I'm reading. Reports from the Altair system. 3 coalition fleets engaged a small swarm group yesterday. All 3 fleets were destroyed without inflicting any measurable damage on the enemy. How is that possible? General Park asked. Dr. Cho pulled up combat footage that had been transmitted before the fleets were destroyed. The holographic display showed massive coalition warships firing energy weapons that passed harmlessly through dark matter entities. Meanwhile, the void creatures extended tendrils that seemed to dissolve the ship's hull plating on contact. Watch this part, Dr. Cho said, pointing to a section of the recording. The coalition ships are trying to retreat, but their navigation systems keep malfunctioning. The AI is getting confused by swarm interference and sending ships directly toward the enemy instead of away from them. President Yoon's image flickered as her transmission was interrupted by another incoming call. General, I have to take this. It's from the Coalition Emergency Council. They're convening an emergency session. The screen went dark, leaving General Park alone with the 2 scientists and the growing pile of evidence that humanity might be the galaxy's last hope. Outside their underground facility, 8 billion humans went about their daily lives, unaware that alien civilizations millions of years older than theirs were crumbling before an enemy that turned their greatest technological advantages against them. Dr. Cho activated his tablet and began making notes. General, if we're right about this biological advantage, we need to start preparing immediately. Training programs, weapon modifications, spacecraft designed for human neural interfaces, instead of AI control. How long would that take? General Park asked. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the crystal dome, but instead of the usual ordered discussions, desperate voices shouted over each other in dozens of languages. The translation systems struggled to keep up with the overlapping conversations about lost worlds, failed strategies, and mounting casualties. Overlord Kylex stood at the center of the assembly, his massive frame showing signs of strain that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Dark patches marked his usually pristine armor, and his voice carried a weariness that spoke of too many defeats and too little sleep. "Order!" he commanded, but even his genetically enhanced vocal cords couldn't silence the panic spreading through. The Chamber Commander Rixtal of the Hegemony 3rd Fleet materialized as a hologram near the speaking platform. Half of his face was covered in medical bandages, and his uniform bore the scorch marks of recent combat. "Overlord Kylex, I must report the complete loss of the Altair defense line. 17 coalition fleets engaged the Void Swarm over 4 systems. None survived." A collective gasp rose from the assembly. The Altair line had been considered impregnable, protected by the most advanced defensive technologies in the galaxy. Bright star of the Luminari flickered weakly, its usual radiant. Glow dimmed to barely visible levels. "How many ships were lost?" "All of them," Commander Rixtal replied bluntly. 8,000 vessels, including the Hegemony flagship Dominator. The swarm didn't just destroy them, it turned our own weapons against us. Our AI targeting systems began firing on friendly ships while our navigation computers sent us directly into swarm formations. Thexanera rose from her seat, her movements slow and painful. Her once perfect carapace was cracked in several places, and one of her 4 arms hung uselessly at her side. "The warrior caste has studied these battles extensively. The enemy doesn't just adapt to our tactics. It learns them instantly and uses them better than we do." "Impossible!" declared Prime Node 7 of the Nexari, its mechanical voice filled with electronic distortion. "Our quantum computing networks process tactical data faster than any biological mind. How can these entities exceed our computational abilities?" "Because they're not computing," Commander Rixtal answered. "They're interfacing directly with our AI systems and rewriting them in real time. Every automated defense, every computer-guided weapon, every AI-controlled ship becomes a tool for the swarm the moment they make contact." Grondak, the ancient Petrarch elder, spoke from his massive platform. His voice rumbled like tectonic, plates shifting. "In my species' memory, we have faced many extinctions. Ice ages, cosmic storms, the death of stars. But this enemy is different. It doesn't seek to destroy us through superior force. It turns our own strength against us." Admiral Velneth of the Aquarian Fleet appeared on another holographic projector, broadcasting from his command ship as it retreated from the latest battle zone. Water dripped from his gills as he spoke, a sign of extreme stress in his species. "The swarm has penetrated the mid-rim territories. At current rates of advance, they will reach the core worlds within 3 months." 3 months? Velthor's crystalline form flashed through angry red patterns. "Our projections suggested we had at least a year to develop countermeasures." "Your projections were based on conventional warfare," Admiral Velneth replied. "This enemy doesn't follow conventional patterns. They don't establish supply lines or staging areas. They don't need to rest or regroup. They simply consume everything in their path and move on." Silence fell over the assembly as the magnitude of their situation became clear. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years were facing extinction in a matter of months. The technology and artificial intelligence that had made them dominant was now their greatest weakness. From the section reserved for junior delegates, a small figure stood up. Kip Fair of the Sylvanese was barely visible among the massive forms surrounding him, but his voice carried clearly through the chamber. Perhaps we should reconsider some previous proposals. All eyes turned toward him. As a junior aide, he rarely spoke during full council sessions. Overlord Kylex's expression showed irritation at the interruption. This is not the time for minor procedural matters, Aide Kipfer. With respect, Overlord, I'm referring to the human proposal from 3 months ago. The small Sylvanese's voice grew stronger as he continued. They offered soldiers for the war effort. We rejected them because they lacked advanced technology. Thexanara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. You would have us rely on primitive biologicals? Species that die of old age before completing basic training? The same primitive biologicals that don't use AI systems, Kipfer replied quietly. The same species that makes decisions based on instinct rather than computation. The implications of his words rippled through the assembly. Prime Node 7's mechanical form whirred as it processed this concept. You suggest that technological inferiority might be advantageous against this enemy? Commander Rixtal's hologram flickered as his transmission was interrupted by weapons fire in the background. When the image stabilized, he was breathing heavily. Aide Kipfer raises an interesting point. In our last engagement, the only ships that managed to inflict any damage on swarm entities were those with manual control systems and biological pilots. Anecdotal evidence. Velthor pulsed dismissively. A few lucky hits don't constitute a viable strategy. Maybe not, Thexanara said slowly. But we have no other strategies left to try. She turned toward Overlord Kylex. Our greatest warriors have fallen. Our most advanced weapons have failed. Our oldest wisdom has proven useless. What do we have to lose by considering alternatives? Grondak's massive head moved in what might have been agreement. The human ambassador spoke of adaptability and determination. At the time, these seemed like weak traits compared to our technological superiority. But perhaps we misunderstood their value. From the Aquarian section, Admiral Velneth's transmission crackled with interference. I've reviewed the human military records that were submitted with their proposal. Their history shows consistent victory against superior forces through unconventional tactics and refusal to surrender. Against other humans, Bright Star flickered weakly. Fighting primitive weapons with primitive weapons. How does that translate to space warfare against entities that exist partially outside normal reality? It doesn't, Commander Rixtal admitted. But our advanced warfare capabilities aren't translating either. The difference is that humans might be able to adapt to new conditions, while our AI systems are locked into patterns the swarm can exploit. Overlord Kylex remained silent for long minutes as discussions continued around him. Reports from the battle lines grew worse by the hour. The Andromeda system had fallen while they debated. The outer colonies of the hegemony itself were sending evacuation requests. Finally, he spoke. The Council faces a choice between certain extinction using proven methods and possible survival using untested alternatives. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a humility that few had ever heard from him. Perhaps our certainty about human inadequacy was premature. Are you suggesting we formally request human military assistance? Asked Prime Node 7. I'm suggesting we explore all available options before our civilization ends, Kylex replied. Commander Rixtal, what is your assessment of human military potential based on their submitted records? The scarred commander considered the question carefully. Their individual soldiers are weaker than most species, their technology is primitive, and their lifespans are brief. But they have two qualities that might be valuable. They adapt quickly to new situations, and they maintain unit cohesion, even when facing impossible odds. Thexanara clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The second quality might be crucial. Our forces have been retreating or surrendering when confronted with swarm tactics they cannot understand. Humans might continue, fighting even when victory seems impossible. Fighting uselessly is not the same as fighting effectively, Velthor pointed out. True, Grondak rumbled. But useful fighting requires survival long enough to learn effective tactics. If humans can survive longer than our forces in combat with the swarm, they might discover methods that we cannot. Another transmission arrived from the battle zones. This one showed the evacuation of an entire star system as void entities consumed the local sun itself. The image of a star being drained of energy and collapsing into darkness sent shudders through species that had thought themselves beyond the reach of cosmic horror. Admiral Velneth's voice came through the speakers with barely controlled panic. The swarm isn't just destroying civilizations anymore. They're consuming the fundamental forces that hold star systems together. At this rate, they won't need to defeat us in battle. They'll simply eliminate the energy sources we need to exist. Silence fell over the assembly again. The scope of the threat had moved beyond military defeat to universal extinction. In that silence, Aide Kip Fair spoke again. I took the liberty of opening an unofficial communication channel with Earth 3 days ago. Every head, sensor, and consciousness in the chamber focused on him. Overlord Kylex's voice carried a dangerous edge. You acted without council authorization? The message reached Earth during a joint session of the Global Defense Council that had been meeting continuously for the past week. Representatives from every major nation sat around the curved table in the underground complex beneath Geneva, watching real-time updates from the galactic war zones. The holographic displays showed red zones spreading across star maps like a plague, each new report worse than the last. Ambassador Kang Minho read the transmission aloud, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was announcing. This is an official request from the Galactic Council emergency session. Earth is formally invited to contribute military forces to the Coalition Defense Force against the Void Swarm threat. Immediate deployment is requested. President Yoon Seojin leaned back in her chair, a thin smile crossing her face. 3 months ago, they laughed at us. Now they're begging for help. The question is whether we're ready to provide it, said General Park Ji-won, gesturing toward the status boards that covered one wall of the room. Our preparations have been accelerating, but we're still months away from optimal readiness. Dr. Cho Hyun-woo stepped forward from the Science Advisory section. His team had been working around the clock to develop neural interface systems that could link human consciousness directly to spacecraft controls. General, we don't need optimal readiness, we need functional readiness. The basic neural resonance disruptors are tested and working. How many soldiers would you need? President Yoon asked. Dr. Cho exchanged glances with his assistant Kim Nari before answering. For the neural networks to be effective, we need minimum 50,000 troops linked through quantum entanglement, but there's no maximum limit. The more human minds we can connect to the weapons systems, the stronger the disruption field becomes against swarm interference. General Park stood and walked to the recruitment status board. Current volunteer numbers are at 200,000 and climbing. Every report from the coalition zones increases enlistment rates. 200,000? Ambassador Kang looked surprised. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations couldn't stop this enemy with fleets of millions. What makes our people think 200,000 humans can succeed? The answer came from an unexpected source. Colonel Bae Yanwoo, a Special Forces commander who had been quietly reviewing human military history, spoke from her seat near the back of the room. Because we've done it before. Not against aliens, but against impossible odds. Humans don't surrender when logic says they should. President Yoon activated her personal communication device and connected to military recruitment centers across the globe. The screens around the room filled with images from dozens of cities. In New York, lines of volunteers stretched for blocks around the recruitment office. In Tokyo, young professionals were leaving their jobs to enlist. In London, Cairo, São Paulo, and Mumbai, the same scene repeated itself. Ordinary people volunteering for a war they knew almost nothing about except that their planet needed them. Issue the call, President Yoon said simply. The recruitment announcement went out simultaneously in every major language on Earth. Within hours, the lines at military centers grew even longer. Sergeant Lee Dong-hyuk, a veteran of 3 different peacekeeping missions, watched in amazement as civilians who had never held weapons lined up beside experienced soldiers. I've never seen anything like this, he told his commanding officer. It's like the entire planet decided to go to war at once. Among the volunteers was Dr. Song Minji, a quantum physicist from KAIST, who abandoned her research on dimensional mathematics to enlist as a combat engineer. When asked why, she simply said, "My equations won't matter if there's no universe left to calculate in." Captain Baek Jin-hwan recalled himself to active duty from retirement, bringing with him 20 years of experience in spacecraft operations. At 55, he was older than most recruits, but his knowledge of manual piloting systems made him invaluable for the neural interface program. The most surprising volunteer was Professor Lim Hana, a 67-year-old xenoarchaeologist who had spent her career studying dead civilizations. When the recruitment officer questioned her age and civilian background, she replied, "Young man, I've spent my life studying what happens when species fail to defend themselves. I'd prefer not to become a case study." In the research labs beneath Seoul, Dr. Cho Hyun-woo worked frantically to prepare the neural interface technology for mass deployment. The quantum entanglement systems that would link human consciousness to spacecraft weapons had never been tested on more than a few dozen volunteers at once. Scaling up to 50,000 troops was an enormous leap into unknown territory. Kim Nari ran calculations on the laboratory's main computers, trying to predict how the neural networks would behave under combat conditions. The theoretical models look promising, she told Dr. Cho, but we're essentially experimenting with human consciousness itself. We don't know what the psychological effects might be. The psychological effects of extinction are worse, Dr. Cho replied grimly. We go with what we have. The first human fleet began assembling in orbit around Earth within 72 hours of the Council's request. Admiral Kim Tae-yang, the youngest fleet commander in human history at 42 years old, watched from the bridge of the flagship Phoenix as ships launched from every major spaceport on the planet. The vessels were a mixture of military craft, converted civilian ships, and experimental designs built specifically for the neural interface systems. Unlike coalition fleets that relied heavily on artificial intelligence, the human ships were designed for manual control. Every major system had biological backups, and the weapons targeting systems required human operators to function. It made the ships slower and less efficient than their alien counterparts, but Dr. Cho's research suggested it might also make them immune to swarm interference. As the fleet prepared for departure, Admiral Kim Tae-yang received personal messages from coalition commanders throughout the galaxy. Commander Rixtal of the Hegemony transmitted a brief video. "Admiral Kim, I have fought the Void Swarm in 9 systems. I have watched civilizations older than your species fall in minutes. If you have found a way to fight them effectively, the galaxy owes you a debt beyond measure." Thexnara sent her own message, her scarred carapace visible in the transmission. "Human Admiral, my warrior caste has learned to respect courage above all else. Your species shows courage in volunteering for this mission. I hope you also show wisdom in combat." The departure ceremony was broadcast across Earth and transmitted to coalition forces throughout the galaxy. President Yoon Seo-jin spoke from the launch platform as the human fleet prepared to leave orbit. 3 months ago, the galaxy's greatest powers rejected our offer to help. Today, those same powers call on us in their darkest hour. We answer not because we were invited, but because it's the right thing to do. Admiral Kim Tae-yang addressed his fleet from the Phoenix's bridge. The neural interface crown rested on his head, already beginning to sync with the ship's systems through quantum fields that human science barely understood. "All ships, this is Admiral Kim. We're heading into combat against an enemy that has defeated forces far more advanced than ours, but we have something they don't expect. The ability to adapt, to change tactics in the middle of battle, and to keep fighting when logic says we should surrender." Dr. Cho Hyun-woo's voice came through the fleet communication system from his position in the Phoenix's science bay. "All personnel with neural interfaces begin synchronization protocols. Remember, your thoughts and decisions become part of the weapon's targeting system. Trust your instincts, not your training. The enemy can predict training, but they can't predict human intuition." As the fleet engaged their jump drives and disappeared into hyperspace, reports arrived of the latest coalition defeat at Kepler Station. 3 different species had combined their fleets in a coordinated assault on a small swarm group. All ships were destroyed, their AI systems turned against them before they could fire a single effective shot. The survivors' reports were transmitted to the human fleet as they traveled through hyperspace toward their first battle. "Commander." Rixital's voice carried exhaustion and despair. "The swarm entities moved like they knew our battle plans before we made them. Every tactical decision we tried, they had already prepared countermeasures. It was like fighting against our own strategic computers. Admiral Kim Tae-yang listened to the reports and felt the weight of an entire galaxy's hopes resting on his shoulders. Around him, 50,000 human minds were slowly synchronizing through neural networks that represented humanity's best guess at how to fight an incomprehensible enemy. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system to find a battle in progress. Coalition ships drifted powerless as dark matter tendrils consumed their hulls. The void swarm entities moved like living shadows, immune to energy weapons and apparently unaffected by the laws of physics that governed normal matter. Commander Rixtal's voice crackled through the communication system, filled with bitter resignation. "Human fleet, retreat while you still can. This is not your grave to fill." Admiral Kim Tae-yang felt the neural interface crown activating, linking his consciousness to thousands of others throughout the fleet. For a moment, the moment Lieutenant Colonel Seo Yunho activated the neural resonance array, everything changed. 50,000 human minds suddenly connected through quantum entanglement, creating a network of consciousness that had never existed before in galactic history. The sensation was overwhelming. Thoughts and instincts from thousands of soldiers flowing together into a collective awareness that somehow remained uniquely human. Admiral Kim Tae-yang felt the connection stabilize and immediately understood what Dr. Cho Hyun-woo had been trying to explain back on Earth. This wasn't artificial intelligence or computer networking. This was human intuition amplified across an entire fleet, creating a decision-making system that operated on instinct, emotion, and split-second creativity rather than logical algorithms. The void swarm entities approached the human fleet with the same tactics that had destroyed every coalition force they had encountered. Dark matter tendrils reached out toward the lead ships, attempting to interface with their control systems and turn them against each other. But instead of connecting with predictable AI networks, they encountered the chaotic neural patterns of human consciousness. For the first time since the war began, the void entities hesitated. Captain Yoon Ji-hye watched from the bridge of the destroyer Seoul as her weapons systems came online under neural control. Instead of computer-calculated targeting solutions, her weapons responded to human instinct and intuition. When a void entity phased partially out of normal space to avoid her missile barrage, she somehow knew exactly where it would reappear and fired at empty space that wouldn't be empty in 3 seconds. The missile struck home, and for the first time in months, a coalition weapon inflicted actual damage on a void swarm entity. The dark matter creature recoiled, its form flickering as it tried to understand how it had been hit by a weapon fired at coordinates that made no logical sense. Throughout the human fleet, similar scenes played out as biological intuition succeeded where artificial logic had failed. Sergeant Kim Woo-jin piloted his fighter craft through impossible maneuvers, dodging void tendrils by making random direction changes that no computer would have calculated. His fellow pilots followed suit, creating a chaotic dance through space that the swarm entities couldn't predict or counter. Commander Rixtal watched from his damaged command ship as the humans engaged the enemy that had destroyed his entire fleet. "Impossible," he whispered, as human weapons found their targets with uncanny accuracy. "They're hitting entities that don't fully exist in our dimensional space." The key was unpredictability. Every decision made by the human neural network was influenced by factors that couldn't be quantified: emotion, instinct, random memories, and creative leaps that defied logical analysis. The Void Swarm had evolved to counter artificial intelligence by reading and predicting computer algorithms, but human consciousness operated on principles that were fundamentally alien to their dimensional existence. Private Kang Woo-jin was manning a plasma cannon turret when a void tendril penetrated his ship's hull. The dark matter entity attempted to drain his life force like it had done to thousands of coalition soldiers, but instead of dying, Woo-jin felt his consciousness being pulled into the neural network. His dying mind became part of the collective awareness that guided the fleet's weapons systems. Dr. Song Min-ji, monitoring the neural interfaces from the science bay, made a startling discovery. "Admiral, Private Kang's neural patterns are still active in the quantum field even though his body is clinically dead. His consciousness has become a permanent part of the network." The implications were staggering. Human minds, when connected, through quantum entanglement, could apparently survive the death of their physical bodies and continue contributing to the collective intelligence. The Void Swarm had encountered something completely outside their understanding, a species that could literally think beyond death. As more human soldiers fell in battle, their consciousness patterns were absorbed into the neural network rather than being destroyed. The fleet's decision-making capabilities actually improved as it incorporated the experiences and instincts of fallen warriors. Each death made the surviving humans more effective rather than weaker. Admiral Velneth transmitted. From his position at the edge of the battle zone, his aquatic voice filled with wonder. "Human Admiral, your forces are not just fighting the swarm, you're winning. How is this possible?" Admiral Kim Tae-yang felt the answer flowing through the neural network from thousands of connected minds. "Admiral Velneth, we're not winning because we're better than you. We're winning because we're different. The swarm adapted to fight logical enemies, but humans aren't entirely logical." The battle turned into a rout, as void entities that had never experienced defeat found themselves unable to counter human unpredictability. Their attempts to interface with human technology failed because the weapons were guided by biological consciousness rather than artificial intelligence. Their efforts to predict human tactics failed because human decisions were based on intuition and emotion rather than strategic calculation. Captain Baek Jinwan led a squadron of fighters in an attack run that violated every principle of space combat doctrine. Instead of maintaining formation and following predetermined attack patterns, the human pilots broke apart and attacked from random directions at random intervals. The void entities, evolved to counter coordinated military tactics, couldn't adapt to the beautiful chaos of human creativity. For the first time since the war began, void swarm entities began retreating. Dark matter creatures that had consumed entire star systems fled from human weapons, guided by the unpredictable neural patterns of biological consciousness. The retreat was so unprecedented that coalition forces initially assumed it was some kind of tactical deception. Admiral Kim Tae-yang received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council chambers. Overlord Kylex appeared on screen, his expression showing a mixture of amazement and humility that few beings had ever seen from him. "Admiral Kim, the Council formally requests Earth's full membership in the Coalition Defense Force. We appreciate the offer," Admiral Kim Tae-yang replied, watching as human ships pursued fleeing void entities across the star system. "But right now, we're a little busy cleaning up the mess you couldn't handle." The neural network carried the collective satisfaction of 50,000 human minds at that response. After months of being dismissed as primitive and worthless, humanity had just demonstrated its value in the most definitive way possible. Dr. Cho Hyun-woo monitored the neural interface systems as the battle continued. The consciousness of Private Kang Woo-jin and dozens of other fallen soldiers had become permanent fixtures in the quantum field, their experiences and instincts guiding weapons with an accuracy that improved with each engagement. Death, for humans connected to the neural network, had become simply another form of service. As the last void entities fled the Kepler system, reports began arriving from across coalition space. Human fleets using neural interface technology were achieving victories that had seemed impossible just days earlier. The biological unpredictability that alien species had mocked was proving to be the one weapon the Void Swarm couldn't counter or adapt to. Commander Rixtal approached the human flagship in a damaged shuttle, requesting permission to come aboard. When he was escorted to the bridge, the proud hegemony officer did something that shocked every alien observer. He saluted Admiral Kim Tae-yang with the formal respect reserved for superior officers. "Admiral," he said, "my species has ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years. In all that time, we have never encountered a force we could not eventually defeat through superior technology and strategic thinking. You have shown us that there are other forms of strength." Admiral Kim Tae-yang felt the neural network processing the commander's words through 50,000 human perspectives. The collective response was typically human, proud but not arrogant, satisfied but ready to keep fighting. "Commander, we didn't save the galaxy because we're superior to you. We saved it because we're different from you. Sometimes being different is what matters most." 6 months later, the Galactic Council chambers had been rebuilt and expanded to accommodate Earth's new status as a founding member of the restructured coalition. Ambassador Kang Min-ho sat at the primary council table, no longer a petitioner. but an equal partner in galactic governance. The Void Swarm had been pushed back to the galactic rim, their advance stopped by human-guided coalition forces that they couldn't predict or counter. Human neural interface technology was being adapted for use by other species, creating hybrid defense systems that combined alien technology with human unpredictability. Thexnara approached Ambassador Kang after a particularly successful joint operation against the remaining swarm strongholds. Her carapace had healed from her earlier injuries, but she wore the scars proudly as reminders of the dark time before humans joined the war. "Ambassador Kang," she said, "I must ask you something that has puzzled my species since your first victory. How did humanity know that biological consciousness could succeed where artificial intelligence failed?" Kang considered the question, thinking of the millions of humans now serving throughout coalition space and the growing network of consciousness that connected them all.